Hey Rising Church, hope you're doing well. Hope you guys enjoyed your week off last week and had the chance to catch your breath as we've been swimming in some deep waters in Revelation. Maybe just like, I'm drowning, let me have a chance to catch a breath. So hopefully you guys had a good time, had some fellowship time, had a chance to take a break. As we dive back in today, or this week, we're going to be looking at something that I think would be very interesting to you, something we actually skipped over on Sunday morning, and that was the first section of chapter 7. I was hoping to be able to do that in a video to kind of give you a little bit further, a little bit of depth behind it and maybe a further understanding of it as we're going to talk about when it comes to expectations. And I think a lot of times humans, we have expectations of God, like, hey, God, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's kind of, we reverse our roles where we become God telling him what to do as opposed to him being God telling us what to do. And expectations can be a dangerous thing. And so when we talk about Revelation, obviously we have a lot of expectations based on what we think God should do, and maybe that's not exactly what he's going to do. And so we're going to see that played out in history a little bit, as well as maybe in Revelation chapter 7. So in Revelation chapter 7, if you read the first part, you understand, you hear this number, this mysterious enigmatic number that you're like, what is this whole thing? And it talks about the 144,000. In fact, in Revelation 7:4, it says this, and I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. And then, in the next, 4 verses, he starts talking about, hey, here's each of these tribes, and each tribe, there's 12 tribes of Israel, and each tribe is, multiplied times 12, then times 1,000, and then you get this 144,000. And so it's interesting when people have looked at this number throughout church history, they're trying to figure out, well, what is this number? What is 144,000? What's the significance of this number? And some people have taken this number literally, saying there is 144,000, literally 144,000. Some believe that these are Jews, ethnic Jews who come to faith in Jesus during the end times, during this tribulation period. And so it is literally 144,000 people. Other people, some cults, maybe you've heard the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they believe that this is the number, like there's 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses that will be saved in the end, that will be with God in heaven, which is a kind of a sad number if you really think about it, because right now, currently, there are 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses. So 144,000, that means, only 144,000 of you, and actually throughout all history, are going to make it in, which isn't good odds. So that's how they interpret that number. But really, the question is it symbolic or is it literal? And that's something that you're always going to wrestle with when it comes to Revelation, when it comes to all the imagery and the figurative language and these symbolic numbers and what do they mean? And so is 144,000, is it a literal number or is it a figurative number? And I think maybe it'll help us a little bit, because if you look at chapter 7 and you read what happens immediately after this, you see something very different. So John hears this number, 144,000, 12 tribes of Israel, times 12, times 1,000. He hears this number, but then he sees something different. And that's what you see in verse 9. He says, after this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, every tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And they were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out to God, salvation belongs to God. And this whole idea is John hears this number, but then when he looks, he sees this great multitude. And so you see this contrast. And so what's going on here? Why does he hear 144,000, but then he sees the multitude beyond counting? And it's kind of interesting if you think about this, because it could be that there's an Old Testament expectation that the people had, and then there's a New Testament fulfillment which went against everything that they believed. If you think back to chapter 5 of Revelation, when John heard, he heard, he was freaking out, if you remember, because nobody could open the scroll, nobody was worthy, nobody had the authority, nobody had the jurisdiction or the rights or whatever you want to say to open the scroll. And if you remember, one of the elders says to him, hey, do not weep, in chapter 5, verse 5. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, he is able to open the scroll and the 7 seals. So John hears from this elder, hey, don't freak out, don't worry, don't weep. There is one who is worthy. It's the Lion of the tribe of Judah, right? And then if you remember, in the very next verse, he hears this, and then what does he see? Verse 6, then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders and all the rest of that, right? So he hears this idea this Lion of the tribe of Judah. But then what he sees is Jesus. He sees this lamb looking as if it was slain. And so it's this idea again, there was this Old Testament expectation about how the Messiah would be, how he would look, what he would do. If you remember Palm Sunday, we celebrate that. That was the expectation. When Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, they were screaming and yelling and palm branches, right? Same imagery as what we saw here in chapter 7. It says, hey, he is coming as the lion. He's going to do away with the evil here, with the Roman Empire. He's going to set up this kingdom that's going to last forever and ever. So there was this expectation that they had of what the Messiah was supposed to look like. But then what really happened was Jesus was the Lamb of God who laid down his life on our behalf. And so you have this expectation, but then you see the fulfillment in a very, very different way. And so is that what's happening here in Revelation chapter 7? Is that he hears this number, 144,000, right? From every tribe. It's Jews, it's ethnic Jews coming to faith in Jesus. It's like, is that what's going on? Is that who Jesus came to deliver? Which is what the Old Testament expectation was. This is for the Jewish people. It's for the nation of Israel and exclusively for them. But then what he sees is he sees this multitude of people from every tribe, every language, every tongue, and that's what he sees. And so you see Jesus fulfill the Old Testament prophecies, but he does it in a way that they didn't expect. And so that's kind of an interesting thought. If you go all the way back, remember when we did the timeline of history, you remember in Genesis chapter 12 that God makes these promises to Abraham, right? That's kind of where the story began, and everything else is kind of prehistory. If you remember, we talked about this. And he says, hey, you're going to be this great nation, this people. I'm going to bless you. He says, hey, you're going to have this land. And he says, through you, there's going to be this blessing that's going to be for all people, all nations. And so from the Jewish perspective, their expectation was this blessing was going to be for them. But when Jesus came, he's like, no. This blessing is for all nations. It's for all peoples. That's why John 3:16 does it say, for God so loved the nation of Israel, this one people? No, it says, for God so loved the world. And that's why in Revelation chapter 5, again, we talked about this before and we skipped over a little bit, but they sing a song. If you remember, they're singing a song to Jesus who is standing before the throne. And it says, you are worthy to take the scroll in verse 9 and to open its seals because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe, every language, every people, every nation. And then chapter 7, 2 chapters later, in verse 9, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, every tribe, every people, every language. And so it's the idea that we have this expectation. There's this Old Testament expectation, and God says, that's nice, but I am doing something much, much bigger. This isn't just for a people, this is for all people. If you think about Jesus, again, we've talked about this before, but the Great Commission, right? The end of Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Therefore go and make disciples, that's the command, of all nations. It's like Jesus is saying, hey, this isn't just for certain people. It's not just for some people. It's for all people. And maybe that's what we see here in chapter 7. We see this Old Testament expectation. Jesus coming, he's the Messiah. He's for the Jews, 144,000. But he's like, no, that's what you think, but here's what's actually going to happen. And then there's this multitude of people from every tongue, every language, every nation. And so Jesus breaks our expectations. He's got something much bigger in store. And so I think that's an important thought for us to have, especially as we read Revelation, because we do tend to, as human beings, place expectations on God, not just when it comes to Revelation, but in life in general, and saying, hey, God, this is what you need to do. Here's what you should do. Here's our suggestion box, our comment cards. We kind of try to boss him around. He's going, that's nice and all, but I got my own plans, and my plans are going to exceed your plans because yours are so limited. 144,000, that's kind of a small number compared to the multitude. He's like, hey, here's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. That's part of it, but then there's the Lamb of God. And so I think God just loves breaking our expectations and doing things way beyond anything that we could ever ask or imagine or think or dream up. God's doing something much, much bigger. And so when it comes to Revelation, I just think have that mentality. That we may think that this is what God is going to do or what he should do, or we can interpret scripture the way we want, just like in the Old Testament or the New Testament folks, they would look at Old Testament and interpret it the way they wanted, saying, hey, we want this thing to be all about us. And God's going, just hold on. I'm going to break all your expectations. I'm going to do something so much bigger, so much greater, so much grander, beyond anything you could ever think or imagine. And I think it's good for us to think that when it comes to Revelation, because so many people try to nail it down, try to tell you what everything means. And I think God's just up there going, nah, that's a nice try, but I got something much bigger in store. So God is a God who loves to break our expectations. So food for thought. Hope you guys have a great discussion in your growths today. And as we continue diving into Revelation, see you.